This episode is sponsored by Squarespace. I used Squarespace to build both Basics with Babish and BingingWithBabish.com. On the sites, you'll find recipes, equipment lists, other news, and updates. All beautifully designed, if I do say so myself. Get 10% off your first Squarespace order by visiting squarespace.com/babish.
Duck cake! Yeah, duck cake!
Oh, Bingo, are you sure? That looks hard to make.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Why do you want a duck cake?
Because it made my tail wag.
Can't argue with that. Duck cake it is. Good luck.
What? I have to make it?
I have to take Bingo to mini hockey.
Okay, so as an American, what is mini hockey? Is it hockey for kids? Do they call all sports mini sports in Australia? Do we call it that here too, and I'm just being dumb? Anyway, hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Binging with Babish, where this week we're taking a look at the duck cake from the required viewing for every new parent, Bluey. For the cake, we're beginning the first of many arts and crafts, trimming and folding parchment paper into a round that fits in a 10-inch cake pan, adhering with nonstick spray. Then for the cake batter itself, into the bowl of a stand mixer goes 450 grams or 1 pound of unsalted room temperature butter. Oop, got a little bit of butter on the nobule there. That's what I believe what it's called. Then we're adding 650 grams of granulated sugar, 1.5 tablespoons of baking powder, and 1.25 teaspoons of kosher salt. Beating together with the paddle attachment for 3 to 4 minutes on medium speed until nice and fluffy and 1 or 2 shades paler. Give the bowl a rigorous scraping and then it's time to add the eggs. I'm cracking them one at a time into a small bowl to make sure that I don't mix in any eggshell fragments. 8 room temperature eggs total, making sure each is incorporated before adding the next. Then I'm combining 450 grams of room temperature buttermilk, 115 grams vegetable oil, and 2 tablespoons of vanilla paste. Tiny whisking to combine, and then alternately adding the dries and the wets. First about 1/4 of 680 grams of all-purpose flour, followed by 1/3 of the liquid, another 1/4 of the flour, another 1/3 of the liquid, scraping down the sides of the bowl occasionally and repeating until everything's added. Make sure everything is well and evenly combined, and give the bowl one last mighty scraping to make sure that everything's evenly incorporated. This is going to make a sturdy, construction-grade cake batter suitable for making a duck. Now, in addition to the 2 10-inch cake pans, we need 2 4-inch half sphere pans. Can't line these with parchment paper, so just make sure they're thoroughly lubricated before filling 3/4 of the way with batter. Then I'm also going to utilize these baking nails, spraying them down and pressing the flat head into the center of the cake. These nails heat up and help extra thick cakes bake evenly and give the centers something to climb and hang on to so that they don't collapse. The 10 inchers are baking at 350 Fahrenheit for 37 to 42 minutes, the half spheres at 325 for 30 to 35 minutes. Once completely cooled, I'm placing a sheet of parchment paper on a wire rack, punching the cake nail through it and precariously inverting, testing your thumb strength as you remove the cake pan and pull out the baking nail. Repeat with the other 10-inch cake and the cake half spheres. Remember that this is a family show, so just don't say anything right now. Don't say anything. Just quickly pop off the pans and pull out the nails before anyone has a chance to be inappropriate. Now these guys can get wrapped in plastic and fridged until ready to use. Now you could just buy caramel corn, but if you want to make it for some reason, we're heating 50 grams of coconut oil and 3 popcorn kernels in a stock pot over medium-high heat until they start to pop. Remove from the heat and add 60 grams of kernels, or about 1/3 of a cup, covering and tossing off heat for about 30 seconds. Return it to medium-high heat, keep it covered, and keep it moving for 2 to 3 minutes until all the kernels have popped. As soon as you hear about 1 to 2 seconds between pops, immediately take it off the heat and dump it into a bowl. Then to make the caramel coating, in a saucepan we're combining 150 grams of brown sugar, 85 grams of unsalted butter, and 170 grams or 1/2 cup of corn syrup. Bringing that to a rolling simmer and whisking occasionally until it reaches 240 degrees Fahrenheit. Then we're whisking in 1/2 teaspoon each kosher salt and vanilla extract and 1/8 of a teaspoon of baking soda before pouring over the popcorn and stirring to evenly combine. Spread it out as flat as possible on a parchment paper lined rim baking sheet and send it into a 250 degree Fahrenheit oven for 45 minutes to 1 hour, taking it out and giving it a stir every 20 minutes to make sure that it bakes evenly. Then we're going to let it cool completely before breaking it up, snacking on it, and or decorating it in cakes. Now for the frosting, this interesting technique comes courtesy of Serious Eats. In a saucepan, we're combining 680 grams of whole milk with 115 grams of all-purpose flour, 500 grams of granulated sugar, and cooking over medium heat for 3 to 4 minutes until it turns into a thick paste. Now I discovered you have to whisk this constantly while it's cooking, otherwise you're going to end up with some lumpy junk like this. As far as I can tell, there's no saving it, so just start over and make sure you're keeping it moving the whole time it's cooking until it's a thick, smooth flour sugar paste. To cool this quickly, we're pouring it out onto a plastic-lined rimmed baking sheet, letting it sit at room temperature until the bottom of the pan is no longer or warm. Now to make the frosting, we're basically beating this roux-like slurry together with a whole bunch of butter. 675 grams worth of butter, unsalted and at room temperature in the bowl of a stand mixer. We're going to beat that on medium speed for 2 to 3 minutes until it's light and fluffy. Then we're going to scrape down the sides of the bowl and start adding the slurry 1 spoonful at a time, moving slowly at first, making sure each spoonful is incorporated before adding the next, scraping down the sides of the bowl twice throughout the process. Whenever you're making anything for a cake, you can pretty much assume you want to scrape down the bowl a few times while you're doing it. Once you got all the paste in there, things are going to be pretty thick and gloopy. So we're going to want to, once again, scrape down the sides of the bowl and attach the wire whip, with which we're going to whip things into a light, fluffy, whipped cream-like frosting. This is a good time to add a pinch of salt and the requisite food coloring, as well as any flavors if you're using them, vanilla, fruit syrup, so long as it doesn't affect the bright yellow rubber duck color. You can optionally put about half of this stuff into a piping bag for easier application down the line, because now it's time to shape and decorate. First, we're going to stack the 2 10-inchers and trim them into a teardrop shape with a tapered tip, and we're not going to do this on plastic wrap. That's what we're not going to do. I'm simply demonstrating what not to do. Now with the trimmings, we're going to make a kind of modeling cake, breaking up the scraps into as crummy a mixture as possible, adding a big dollop of frosting, and mixing until you end up with a moldable paste. You can also use the extras to make cake pops if you like. Now to assemble the cake, we're first placing a little smear of frosting on our cake turntable. You can also do this with a cake board if you want to move the cake later on, applying a generous coating of frosting on the first layer of the cake, flattening it out, and creating a cake sandwich. Now you could just stop here if your child isn't old enough to form memories yet, but if their happiness is important to you, we should probably keep going, covering the whole thing in a thin layer of frosting and shaping a sort of tail out of the molding cake, and covering that with frosting to make things seamless. Now I'm going to place this guy in the fridge for about 15 minutes to firm things up, during which time we can begin our work on the duck's head, unwrapping our cake half spheres, cutting off excess so they're nice and flat on top, spreading one side generously with frosting, making sure it's nice and flat, and sandwiching between the other side, creating a cake burger. Now the head needs a little bit of a platform to be placed on, sort of like a neck, so I'm placing a mound toward the front of the cake, flattening the center of it, and placing the cake burger over top, pressing a boba straw all the way down through the center of it to marry it to the bottom of the cake. Snip the excess off the top, and then it's time to put down a crumb coat of frosting. This is a thin layer of frosting that keeps crumbs from ending up in the final product. Not super necessary with this sturdy a cake, but better safe than sorry. Fridge for 15 minutes, and then we can start piping on a thick, even layer. Just get as much as you can on there, all over the thing. And then comes a process that I'm not terribly good at, making things smooth, even, and generally professional looking. I'm starting with an offset spatula and then switching to an icing scraper. This can be especially useful for rounded surfaces like, a sphere. Make sure the duck's butt is nice and clean, and then it's time to make a face. The eyes are made from 2 strings of black licorice, which I'm cutting from some sort of Australian licorice string product, forming into an oval and carefully placing with cartoon-like whimsy. Then the corneas of these eyes, the pupils, I don't know what they are represented by 2 orange M&Ms. Make sure the logo's facing inward so that your kid doesn't think that you're doing product placement on their birthday. The duck bill, of course, is 2 wavy potato chips. Why not Pringles? I have no idea. And then for some reason, it has a full head of caramel corn hair, followed by 3 red M&M buttons and a bright red western bow tie, which I'm going to make out of a fruit by the foot, sort of tying it and pressing it into a bow and affixing it to the neckline. Now that's one classy duck. And there you have it, Bingo's birthday cake of choice, duck cake. My tail's wagging just looking at it. It's pretty rough around the edges, but we'll just pretend I did that on purpose to be show accurate. Now for the surprisingly difficult part of cutting a slice. As you can see, I'm having a bit of a moral dilemma. This thing's pretty cute. I don't really want to shove a knife into it. Yeah, that admittedly feels weird, but it cuts a nice, clean, professional looking slice, and look, he's still smiling. See, kids, he likes it, but how does it taste? And admittedly, I was more interested in the constructability of this cake rather than its flavor. So it's a little bland, everything's very vanilla, but I made an important discovery. You got a boring cake, crumble some potato chips and caramel corn on there. Instant sweet, salty, and savory upgrade. And if there's one thing I've learned from watching Bluey with my nephews, it's when to stop and enjoy the silly, small victories that make parenting, cake making, worthwhile. Thanks again to Squarespace for sponsoring today's episode. They've been a great partner in supporting the Babish culinary universe and bringing my websites to life. From websites to online stores to domains and analytics, Squarespace is the all-in-one platform for you to build your online presence. They also have SEO tools so that your site is getting found and searched by more people more often. If you want to try it for yourself, you can start your free trial today by visiting squarespace.com/Babish to get 10% off your first purchase.